Hi everyone, my name is Justin Odisho, and in this episode of Every Effect in After Effects Explained, we're going to be taking a look at the distort effects. These are some of the most fun and varied effects in After Effects. So let's get started. I have a couple random clips just for sample on my timeline, and the first one is the Bezier Warp. This just allows us to warp based on different points and pins, and a lot of these effects we're actually going to be able to click and move around anchor points. So you can also, in the effects control panel, adjust each slider with X and Y axis, but it's just a little bit more intuitive to use the actual sliders. So this allows you to warp in all of these curved ways. And remember, you can always add keyframes or expressions on any of these. Next up, we have bulge. This one's pretty self-explanatory. It just creates a bulge in one area, so you can choose how big that circle is or oval, and you can also choose the strength of that, so the height and the taper radius is how close it gets to that edge. You can also choose the center, so you can imagine the ways that you can use this effect to bulge different parts of the screen. Next up, we have CC Bend It. This one kind of turns your layer into this rectangular tower shape and allows you to bend in different ways. So you can bend it completely into a circle. You can choose to just keep the bottom part static, so just bending the top. And you can also change the start and end points so that you get more of the clip happening. And remember, not only can you use these for video clip layers, you can also use them for text or shape objects as well. So if I had sample text and I use the bend it effect on there, I can apply any of these things on text layers or even shape layers. So keep that in mind. Going along with bend, we have bender. This one's similar, but it just bends the clip in a less rectangular way, just kind of the top, and you can adjust where that bend starts or finishes. So remember, you can always move these anchor points along the image. And a lot of these distortion ones, you can just kind of see what they do visually. Next up, we have Blob Eli. So this one's kind of a cool stylizing distortion. It takes your clip and it kind of turns it into melty liquid chrome blob. What you're seeing behind it right now is other layers that I have open. But if I hide those all, you see we got this transparency going on. And that's because it's working based off of lightness right now. But if we just did the red channels or the blue channels, we can get different results. And we can also choose different amounts of cutaway strength. But not only can you blob the layer itself, you can also set it to another layer. So I can choose this liquidy ripple water layer to act as the blob layer that's getting information of. So now we have like those liquid ripples happening on this clip, which is cool. It kind of makes it look like it itself is in a puddle of water reflection. The next one is CC Flow Motion. This one's really cool. It has two like knots in the clip. So you have this point and this point, and you can choose the amount of strength, and the entire clip kind of gets sucked into that knot point and creates like these infinite looping fractals. So you can choose the strength amount to each point in or out. And you can imagine if you animate these, you can get these cool, trippy animations, especially on this clip with these cool light patterns. But you can move those knots anywhere to create their own kind of black hole of gravities. Next up, we have CC Griddler. This one just kind of cuts the clip up into grids. So by default, nothing happened. But if I increase the size of the scale a little bit, you see it stretches into these zigzag pattern lines. I can do that vertically or horizontally. And I can even rotate the clip within those grids and increase or decrease the tile size. So it's kind of reflecting or offsetting the clip into these different grids. So this one can be pretty cool. I can imagine different ways that you could use this. Next up, we have CC Lens. This is a way to add some lens distortion. So you can see this could be used like a transition, like boom, if you animate it, or if you wanted to add some fisheye look around the edge, or even maybe fix a little bit of lens distortion that was happening. You could try to do that. Next up, we have CC page turn. So this is like a page turn effect. The cool part is you can adjust it with your mouse and anchor point. So it literally peels away like a sticker almost, or like a page turning. And if you wanted to adjust it manually, you could also change like the direction of the light reflection or the glossiness of it, the fold amount, and what corner it's coming from. So maybe top left instead. Maybe not for these two video clips, but maybe you're actually doing like a storybook type of effect, and you can actually do cool page turns on them. Next up, we have CC Power Pin. This allows us to pin the corners of our image onto other points. So kind of if you want to pin into perspective another video clip, maybe on the front of this bus or on the side of a building, you can do stuff like this to pin shapes or clips onto other parts. Next up, we have CC Ripple Pulse. This one might seem like nothing happens when you apply it onto the clip, but if you animate the keyframes actually, so let's start from 100 maybe, and go down to 0 or negative, and go back up. And we can adjust the amplitude to our liking as well, and also the center point. You can kind of see there's a little ripple pulse going on, and it animates. See, it kind of sends out like a radar pulse. That can be interesting. Maybe you could apply it just onto a gradient or some sort of other texture and send out pulses from a certain section. Next up, we have CC Slant. This allows us to slant our shape or layer just from one edge, and you can choose the height of that slant. And also you can make it stretch or non-stretching, so just another way to distort or skew your image. Next up, we have CC Smear. Just like the title suggests, it allows us to create a smear. So you got like 2 points, and you can imagine if you're dragging your finger on across the image and smudging it. This can be cool to smudge through different parts of the image, and you can choose the strength and radius of that as well. So a big smear or just a light smear, but that can be cool for some liquidy distortion effects along 2 points. Next up, we have CC Split. This just creates a split or rip or open in the image between 2 points. So here's the 2 points here, and if I open up that split with the split strength, it creates that kind of split. And you can also adjust where those points are, so it's almost like a zipper. And going along with that, you also have Split 2. This is the same thing, except it just cuts it in half, so you can do the bottom split and the second split separately, so you have 2 different parameters for those. Next up, we have CC Tiler. This one will allow you to tile the image onto itself, so this is 100%, but we can zoom out and create infinite tiles. This can be cool for different types of transitions even. And you can also choose to offset the center and blend it back in with the original too. Next up, we have Corner Pin. This is kind of like the CC Power Pin, but this one just allows us to adjust the corners and pin them on to our own corners that we set. So let's say I put this video clip on this floor tile. Next up, we have kind of a more utilitarian one, Detail Preserving Upscale. This allows us to scale up the image and still try to maintain some of the sharpness. So it tries to add in sharpness while still zooming up. This can be good when you have clips of different sizes and you need to scale one up a little bit to match the others, but you don't want to lose sharpness or cases like that. Next up, we have Displacement Map. This is similar to how we used another layer for the Blob Eli's effect. This can allow us to choose one layer to displace another. So for example, I have this layer of some water rippling, and I can use that layer to be the displacement layer for this. So I can choose that layer from the drop-down menu, and I can make it displace as heavily or as strong as I want. And now you see we're displacing this clip using the contrast and texture of that other layer. So we're kind of getting a water ripple on this clip. So there's many ways that you can combine different layers together. Like you can make a flag wave ripple. And not only can you use video clip layers, but you can also create all types of solids or gradients. Something like these fog presets that are available in After Effects. And you can use these generated effects to even act as a displacement map. So you can kind of create all types of different unique animations in that way. Next up, we have Liquify. This is a cool one. It's kind of like the smear tool, but in this case, you can smear much more than just 2 points. You can smear with just a finger smudge, and you can change the percentage, or you can choose different tools like these wavy tools or these twirly tools. And you can also increase your brush size and brush pressure if you want it to smear in stronger ways. And you can kind of blend up and smear up your image. And if you wanted to animate pulling it back or in, you have the distortion percentage, so you can take it all the way back to 0. Just kind of maybe gradually melt or animate through the image. Next up, we have Magnify. This just creates a little magnification on the clip. So you can increase the magnification amount, how much it's zooming in, like so. Or you can also increase the size of that magnification circle. Also the feather, the opacity, and the shape of that as well. So this can be useful to maybe magnify or zoom in to one part of a clip. Next up, we have Mesh Warp. This one's cool. It allows us to, it adds a mesh onto the image, and then it allows us to warp the image along that mesh. So each one of these has a point on it, and you can pull along that point and distort in that way. So you can create distortions for creative effect, or you can try to fix distortions, like, I don't know, make somebody's muscles bigger or make somebody look taller and things like that. So you can change the amount of rows and columns to distort upon. So if I just wanted a couple rows to distort upon, I could do that, create these kind of swirling effects, or just gives you cool flexibility to distort around any point of the image. Next up, we have Mirror. This one you might be familiar with. It's pretty standard. Just allows us to reflect our entire image along a certain angle. So here's a 90-degree angle. You can just imagine like a horizontal mirror cutting across the image. And you can also change the point that it cuts across the image. So the reflection center. So if I made it reflect right here, that would be the point. I can lift up the reflection center. Or here it is at a 180 degree or up and down mirror angle. And you can even stack mirrors on top of each other. So if I put another mirror on this clip and did this one at 90 degrees, now we have 2 mirrors, one cutting it in half vertically and then horizontally. So you can stack reflections in this way. Next up, we have Offset. This one just kind of offsets the image along its X and Y points. So we can shift the center of the image over and it'll just kind of repeat in half along itself. We can also shift it vertically. So we've just kind of offset the center of the image on itself. You can create a rolling effect in this way. Next up, we have Optics Compensation. This is kind of like the CC lens effect, but in a little bit more of a utilitarian sense. It just allows us to compensate for lens distortion that happened, either bringing the field of view back in a little bit around the corners or back out a little bit if you happen to have some lens distortion. But I suppose you could use it for a creative effect as well. After that, we have Polar Coordinates. This takes the image and wraps it around different poles. So if I increase that amount, this is polar to rectangular. If I change it to rectangular image to polar, that brings us the full globe circle here. So you can take rectangular image and make them into globes like this, or take circular images and make them rectangular. Now for this next effect, Reshape, it doesn't actually work if you just drag it onto a clip. You're actually going to need some mask information to work with. So I've got 2 PNG shapes that I've dragged onto the clip, just the After Effects and Creative Cloud logos. And I'm going to make a mask out of them by going to Layer, Auto Trace, and creating a mask from the alpha channel here, pressing OK. So there's one mask, and I'll mask the After Effects logo as well, which is really just a square, but we'll still do the auto trace and create a mask for that. Now I'm actually going to take the masks from both of those that we just created. I'm going to copy it and I'm going to paste it on to my After Effects layer. So take both of those masks and I'll paste it onto the After Effects layer. Now I don't actually want the mask to do anything yet, so I'm going to set the blending mode of both of those to none, but we have two masks on this clip that we're going to use. So I'm going to add the reshape effect onto this After Effects logo now, and I can choose the source mask. So source mask, mask 1, which is just the square mask. You can see because this is green and this is green, that's how you know what is what. And destination, what we want to morph it to, is mask 2, which is that Creative Cloud one. So now with some simple keyframes on the percentage, we can go from 0 to 100 and it'll morph this to that Creative Cloud shape. So let's say I added the keyframe there, went over a little bit, made 100% morph. Then I can repeat the same process for the Creative Cloud shape. Or in this case, I can just kind of turn the opacity of the Creative Cloud shape on if we didn't want to morph back and forth. So we'll go from 0 to 100% there. So when I press play, this is just one crude or quick animation, but you get an idea of what the morph tool is able to do. And if you really want it to look even smoother, you'd probably morph both of the layers. So you can play around with the keyframes and the methods. Next up, we have ripple. Back to our regular distortions. This just allows us to add kind of like a water drop ripple across the whole image. We can choose the speed of the ripples, so how fast they'll animate out from the center. And you can also choose the center point of the ripple as well. So you can keyframe any one of these points, remember, and add expressions to any one of these points. Next up, we have rolling shutter repair. If you ever have a clip where maybe you move the camera, whip it around a little too quickly, and there ends up being some distortion or kind of like a scan line that happens. This clip isn't really the best example, but you can add the rolling shutter repair on there and it will try to fix the distortions that happen from the shutter not being able to refresh quickly enough from you moving it. Next up, you have smear. This is another one where you're going to need to use masks. It doesn't do anything right away, but if I do use, let's say, a circular mask, and then I create another mask, you do need a shape source and a boundary. And just so we don't actually mask the image, I'm going to set those to none, but we just have the masks there. I can set the source to mask 1 and then the boundary to mask 2, and I can increase the percentage of smear that happens. So you can smear between those two masks, stretching one to the other, and I can also add rotation if I want. So this is an interesting, unique way to smudge and smear things. Next up, we have spherize. This just kind of creates a more sphere-like image. It kind of creates a kind of gas bubble underneath your image or clip. After that, we have transform. This kind of gives us all of our transformation options that are normally available under the clip controls, but in an effect control. So if you more flexibility for keyframing and adjusting in this way or compositing, but you have all the basic ones here like scale, rotation, skew, opacity, things like that. So just another way to apply your transformations if you needed them outside of the clip for some reason. After that, we have turbulent displace. This is kind of like the ripples, but it ripples in more like a turbulent, different pattern. You can actually choose turbulent, bulge, twist. There's all kind of different ones, and you can change the size to be smaller or larger, and also the evolution of it. So this one, unlike the wave warp and the ripple, it doesn't animate on its own. It kind of just puts your image through this blender. But if you wanted to animate it, you can keyframe the evolution or the complexity or the offset of it. So you have different options there. Kind of makes it look like we're looking through a glass of water almost. After that, we have twirl in the T's here, and twirl, pretty basic. We can just twirl around a center point. We can increase or decrease that radius and also change the center point. Wrapping up with the W's here, we have warp. This just allows us to bend and warp our image or text or shape, remember. Let's say we want to apply this on text instead. Warp, we can bend the text in an arc, a shell. This is very reminiscent of basically the same tools you have in Photoshop for text warping. And then you have warp stabilizer. So again, this is kind of like the rolling shutter repair, where you're gonna want, if your clip is shaky for some reason and you want it to manually fix it, you can add the warp stabilizer on there. It will analyze your clip and go through all the frames, and then once it's done, it will try to artificially stabilize your clip, make it so it's less shaky and more smooth. It might need to zoom in or crop, but you can see it going here. So I have full separate tutorials on warp stabilizer if you want to see a full in-depth example. Lastly, we have wave warp. So this just adds a wave animation that goes to the clip, and you can adjust the amount of the wave. So this is a sine wave. You can adjust the height and width of it, or you can do like a square wave or a triangle wave, and it will ripple your clip through this wave. You can adjust the direction and the speed of it, so how fast it's rippling. And the pinning allows you to stretch the corners back out if they're becoming transparent again. But that wraps up the basics of all of the Distort different effects. Hopefully you got some good ideas, saw some tools available to you. In the next episode of this series, we're going to be taking a look at a really powerful one, which is expression controls. If you're not subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe to stay tuned for all of my new videos. And I'll see you over in the next video where we go over all of the expression controls. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.